Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We welcome you once again to the platforms of Salam Media on this Wednesday evening. And it is a time of the week where we bring you in conversation with myself, Inayat Wadi, where we unpack in detail a whole host of issues. And the big talking point in South Africa since the weekend has been the case of the Lotus 5, hashtag Lotus 5, as it has been famously coined this morning while we were at the court. And I must say, what a day it was being in court today. And by now, it's already common knowledge that all five have been released, four on bail, and the youngster obviously was released without bail. But again, this raises many a question, and these are questions, these are hard questions that one actually needs to ask. And this is what we aim to actually unpack tonight, where we're talking about the consequences and the legal ramifications as far as this arrest was concerned. And again, more importantly, it is about demanding accountability, it is about demanding justice, and also an end to hypocrisy that somewhat tarnishes our legacy, particularly looking at South Africa, our stance as far as the Zionist state of Israel is concerned, the action at the International Court of Justice, all of that had actually garnered international attention. But when you have incidents like this, it actually overshadows what all the good that the country has done, and more importantly, many individuals. And as we've seen on May the 11th, where we saw five peaceful pro-Palestinian supporters, members of the Red Card Israel campaign, attending the soccer match against Malawi at Loftus Versfeld. And when one looks at what had actually happened to them, and then to add insult to injury, the first bail hearing, and then we heard of a postponement until the 19th, until urgent action obviously was taken. And we've assembled quite a panel, I must say a very powerful panel this evening. We've got four legal eagles, for want of a better term, with us. We've got Fairouz Nagia, who is the advocate of the High Court, Bram Hanekom, joining us today, Africa for Palestine, who's been at the forefront, who flew in from Cape Town to provide much needed guidance and support to the families, and also in terms of the interaction with the legal team. Shabnam, Palesa, Mohamed, a lawyer and an activist, advocate Shameema Dollie, who needs no introduction, member of parliament, Jama-ah party, and we've got Yasmin Omar, attorney who represented the accused today, and also with the Society for the Protection of Our Constitution. To all of you, Bram, Fairouz, Shabnam, Shameema, and Yasmin, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome, and we appreciate your time.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Yes, normally it's a case of ladies first, but I'd really like to begin with Bram this evening. Bram, I think, being in court today obviously was clearly an eye-opener for many people who had attended the hearing, and we wanted to see justice being served and justice being done in terms of the first step, bail being granted. But let's just take a step back, and I spoke about demands of accountability, justice. All of this, at the end of the day, are hallmarks of the incident that had actually taken place on Sunday. And this is the reason why you've come down basically to Johannesburg to provide, as I mentioned, much lended support to both the families, and also your invaluable contribution to the legal team.
No, thank you so much. Firstly, I want to thank Yasmin and Shameema and others who had really played a role throughout the entire period of time. I'm not going to apologize if there's voices of children, because I'm at Sharia Khan's house, a senior member of Jama-ah party, one of the Loftus 5. So if there's some noises in the background, I think please forgive me. They're happy noises because Sharia is back home, and the family, of course, are really thrilled. So I'm going to allow, if you don't mind, little noises in the background. They won't be disruptive because they're happy noises. I think from our side, we have a responsibility to confront injustice, to confront things that don't make sense. Lawyers and advocates analyze law. But the underlying agenda of a constitution like ours is to protect the human rights and dignity of South Africans and all the people in South Africa. And what had happened violated the dignity, the human rights, and the sovereignty even of our nation. Because if we're not allowing South Africans to wear Palestinian Red Card Israel T-shirts while watching soccer in an international soccer match, we've clearly allowed something that's simply unacceptable to happen. So this highlights the importance of ongoing solidarity and activism and actions, because we cannot accept that SAFA or any football association could determine that people inside a stadium must take their T-shirts off. Women, elderly. We can't accept that halfway through the second half in a soccer match, it may suddenly unilaterally be determined that peaceful elderly and children and a diverse group of activists, all in good standing in society, are now problematic protesters and need to be forcefully removed from the stadium. It's absolutely absurd, and it needed to be confronted. So as painful as this has been for the Loftus Five, I think it really puts into the center stage the fact that SAFA is playing into the hands of some agenda of banning Palestinian solidarity at soccer matches. And now, fortunately, because of this terrible incident, I'm sure we're going to confront that head on. Because somebody called those police. Now, we have lots of problems with how the police behaved. But if you have an event, if you rent a stadium or you're hosting a tournament or any function, the police don't come into your function and start taking people out of your game or out of your stadium or your activity or event. So for us, our question starts with how do we allow a situation where the South African Football Association is calling on the South African police to behave like bouncers and forcefully remove people halfway through the second half in a soccer match, because they don't accept or allow us to express our solidarity with Palestine. And in South Africa, this is something that's not going to be allowed, I'm sure. I don't think it would be acceptable under our constitution. I don't think it'll stand the tests of our legal system, that in itself. And if they didn't phone the police to come take people out the stadium, then who did phone the police? Because why did the police feel a need to extract forcefully people, peaceful people, right near the end of a soccer match, risking life and limb? And I truly mean that, because when the police go in with pepper spray and batons in a very crowded stadium environment, it wasn't a very full stadium, but it's a crowded environment. Stampedes may happen. Young people may be squashed in panic, because you don't want in any kind of crowd management to create this kind of panic, because it has happened even in South Africa, and it has happened in many countries in the world, unfortunately, in stadiums where something creates a panic and there's a stampede and people die in numbers. So it was extremely reckless and unnecessary to behave in that manner the police did. But it's also extremely absurd that paying ticket holders in a stadium are being told that they need to leave the stadium when they've paid to watch a soccer match that hasn't finished. And I think that this really provides an immense opportunity for us to put SAFA to the test, and to put this whole concept of Palestinian solidarity being political, when our government has actually taken the Israeli regime to the ICJ and called it genocide. On World Kafir Day, and there's T-shirts with a kafir on it. Our president of the country walking around with a kafir, but we're not allowed to do this at a soccer match. This really highlighted a big problem in our country that we need to confront. We're not going to be a country where people can't watch soccer wearing a red card Israel shirt. And I think that's the bigger cause that the Loftus Five are championing. The cause of our right as South Africans to show our solidarity, our sovereignty, our dignity, and of course to expose this very strange environment where just because there's a soccer match, and an international soccer match where South Africans are playing, where South African fans want to go watch and show their solidarity, in line with a global trend, by the way, that has happened at many soccer matches around the world under different football associations in Europe and even in countries that are not supporting us in the ICJ, but they've allowed for these red card Israel campaigns. But here in South Africa, of all places, SAFA, or the organizers of these soccer matches, which we believe fall under SAFA, felt it acceptable to ban such regalia and solidarity. This really, really is a problem that we shall make sure we confront, in addition to the police abuse and the horrific behavior of those who've been sent. Fundamentally, we don't accept that South Africans wanting to watch a soccer match need to dress in a particular way and can't show their support for Palestine. It's many fundamental rights that were violated, and we're very fortunate to have seen such a good diversity of people coming to the table to support. Several really, really committed activists have now really put effort into it, and we're hopeful that the Loftus 5 will be a turning point that ultimately forces SAFA to do what other football associations have done, which is to support the vote in FIFA to say that Israel should be suspended for its human rights violations, for its occupations, and so on. Because SAFA hasn't even done that. And this is the South African Football Association. Now, they didn't do that. They never came to the press conference, even though they informally informed us the vice president of SAFA was going to attend the press conference at the launch of Week for Palestine, which had Red Card Israel as the theme. They didn't pitch. Numerous attempts of activists to engage SAFA never really became fruitful. And now the sheep has exposed the wolf beneath it, because they literally called the police on soccer supporters for their solidarity with Palestine. And I think it's a turning point. Thank you.
Well, it certainly is. And, there's just so much to unpack from what you've just said. And let's just bring Yasmin, because Yasmin, you obviously represented the Loftus 5. And I think the term hashtag Loftus 5 is actually going to go down in history. And I think years from now, we still will remember. And I think that obviously is a standout for me and for us, particularly as a media. But an important point, and Yasmin, just looking at it from a legal perspective, and what Bram mentioned is our system has actually been put through the test. And I know you spend many, many hours burning midnight oil. I've heard till 3 a.m. in the morning, putting everything together, your team at 1 a.m. Going to take statements from those that were arrested as well. And all of this, in a matter of a few days. And I know, it's been quite hectic, but also at the same time, the key issue here is, as Bram mentioned, the legal system being put through the test. You've had the opportunity now. I'm not too sure what the police have made available in terms of their. I know their charges. They very briefly spoke about the charges in court today, but I don't know how much detail and how much substance there is to actually put this legal system to a test. Yasmin.
Okay, thank you so much. So the material thing that happened on Friday during that arrest and detention of the 5 accused at Loftus was that it did not just affect the 5 accused. These were just the 5 accused that were arrested. But if you saw the footage of what happened, you would have seen a massive operation in which approximately 150 spectators were forced out of the stadium simply because they were wearing the pro-Palestine t-shirts. Now, listen to what Bram has said, and obviously having regard to where our country comes from, we have a constitution, and that constitution was fought hard for. People have shed blood for this constitution, and there are several rights in the constitution that have been violated by what conduct of the police and SAFA on Sunday. Most notably is the constitution guarantees to everybody the right to freedom of expression. So there's simply nothing wrong with spectators coming to the stadium, donning their t-shirts and indicating their support for Palestine. It must be remembered that when they did this, they did not otherwise engage in any conduct that would disturb the sporting event. They otherwise sat up, they put their t-shirts on, and they sat and they encouraged their team. They supported Bafana. It was the AFCON qualifiers. They are serious sports soccer fans, and they were enjoying a good soccer match on a Sunday afternoon. So it was about 20 minutes before the event could finish, before the match could finish, that the police came in. And notably, the police came in targeting the T-shirts, and they asked people remove the T-shirts. And you obviously had mixed reactions to this. And it didn't end there with saying, give us the T-shirts. They then forced approximately 150 people, including women and children, to remove their T-shirts and nonetheless and the people were arrested after that on charges of public violence, of malicious damage to property, resisting, trying to resist arrest. So these charges, notably, are charges that would not otherwise be so serious. So when my lawyers went out on Sunday night, they had the impression that we were going to be able to reach an agreement with the police for police bail. But it was evident after the interaction with the accused and the police that something untoward was happening. This was not the conventional bail application. And this when the matter was seized in court. Because what happened when the matter was seized in court, what we expected to be an unopposed bail application, because we're sitting with 5 accused who have no previous convictions, no pending cases, who are otherwise law-abiding citizens. They were put through the rigmarole of being detained in custody. A minor was detained in custody. None of the laws applicable to minors were applied. A minor just should not have been put in prison in those circumstances. But it raised real concerns for us as well as the family as to why did things go the way they did on Monday. And it was only after we threatened, we said, this is completely unnecessary. You can't. After that, we bring an urgent application on Tuesday afternoon. Then we got calls from various sectors of government saying, look, let's negotiate and let's put things right. Now we need to ask ourselves, why were things not put right on Sunday? Why were things not put right on Monday? That we had to dare them with an urgent application, not dare, threaten them with the urgent application saying, look, we are going to court and a high court is going to undo what you've done. Why did that not work on Monday? And why did we have to use all of this force for the tune in court today to change and for them to say today bail is unopposed? So it just leaves a bad taste that government was only agreed to do what is reasonable after it appears they were forced into engaging with the defense attorneys.
Yes, Yasmin. Let's just bring Shameema into the discussion. Now, Shameema, for a moment, and to be politically correct, I'm not going to say a hat, but if you could remove your legal scarf and put on your political scarf. And the point that was made was, as far as the government is concerned, and I know we've been talking about SAFA, we've been talking about SEPS, but in terms of the nation, in terms of our legacy, and more importantly, looking at it from a government's perspective, because these are comments that have come through South Africa, our position as far as Palestine is concerned, our position with the ICJ, and just looking at it in terms of how is this likely to impact on South Africa as a government, where under this government's watch, we see incidents like these taking place.
The South African government, who is on the forefront of the Palestine activism, who are supporting Palestine. We've got the ICJ case, as you correctly pointed out. Our support for the Palestinians and their freedom, it's very, very clear. I think for us as South Africans, how embarrassing having come out of apartheid and now having to reflect on the actions of police brutality that we saw and the actions that we have seen. And of course, SAPS falls under the national government. It is extremely embarrassing because the world is seeing that, for example, in many a country, you have Palestinian activists at soccer, at many a sport, supporting the Palestinians. And we have not seen what has happened to us as South Africans happening overseas. And in a country which is on the forefront and should be on the forefront, against apartheid, against the brutality and the genocide that is being committed. Here we have the South African police force, the riot sector coming out and disrupting this particular event and showing the world the brutality of old still happening today. It is shocking for us as even as parliamentarians. I think it's absolutely embarrassing that this has actually happened on our watch. So there is some other aspects that I would like to touch on as well, because on justice, the justice portfolio, on sports, arts and culture, as well as on the international relations portfolio. And what has happened has a rippling impact on all those portfolios. For example, if you look at the situation at Loftus Fairveld, I think one of the first things one has to look at when you purchase a ticket, security is at the entrance of Loftus. You have your red t-shirt that states Red Card Israel on, yet security allowed so many individuals to enter upon payment to watch half of the match, and only after that there was no issues, everything was peaceful, and suddenly it became an issue. So that is already one aspect that creates major concern. Then you look at the situation on how the protesters was removed. So there's other aspects which is also raising concern, and I thought about it in hindsight today. Only certain individuals was targeted out of a group of people. Individuals, and this is all on visuals, one can see this. There is so many videos and footage that displays the brutality, the stripping of women, children, and men of the particular sweaters, the actions of the police. So this has a rippling effect on sports, arts, and culture, because we have SAFA, and we also know that SAFA needs to appear before the portfolio of sports, arts, and culture. We know that there are issues within SAFA that is being under investigation. Now we have this particular matter as well. And once again, SAFA's name is linked to it. And it's not the first time at an event that SAFA's name is linked to major concern. So that is the other aspect. And then obviously on an international front, when we are sitting with the ICJ case, where we are fighting tooth and nail against the genocide, etc., what type of example has been set at the Loftus event? And us as South Africans, us as politicians, we have to raise and we are raising our concerns with regard to this particular matter. We have to insist upon an investigation into this matter from the Minister of the Police, as well as the Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture. But then we're also sitting with other dynamics, with entities who are pro certain sectors that is in ministry, who are acting as ministers. And I'm just wondering, when you've got someone like Minister Gayton McKenzie, whose stance on Israel is absolutely clear, how are they going to be neutral in assisting with regard to these particular investigations? So as politicians, especially if you are acting in the interest of the people of your country as well as globally, you need to ask the tough questions. You need to ask for the investigations. You need to ensure that there's accountability, and you need to ensure that there is transparency in these particular matters. So it's a challenge for me to just sit here and speak as a politician, because I'm an activist. By heart, I'm an activist. So I've got my legal section because I work in the National Prosecuting Authority. So I can highlight the sections where I have major concerns with regard to the minor, because one of the areas that I worked in was the juvenile court. I also worked in the family advocate's office. And if you look at the best interest of the child, it was violated. It was completely and utterly violated. This young person had no previous convictions, nothing. At the time that these individuals was detained, there was sufficient time to get this child before a juvenile court, and also to get the child out on warning. There was no need for this child to sit for a few days in a detention center, a juvenile center, a matriculant. How have you impacted on this child? So that is the one. Even with regard to the other detainees, there's major concerns that has arisen that would have also been utilized in the High Court application. because there is major concerns within the police station and with regard to their actions. And I think we need to make this very clear, because fraud, corruption, bribery, it is happening in our country, in SAPS, in the justice system. The wheels has fallen off. So there are many concerns that can also be raised that has transpired in this particular matter. Because I am certain that I don't even want to say it right now, but that if they really wanted to, all 4 detainees could have been released on that particular day. There was no need to keep them. Then if you look at the following day when we went to court, it is such a simple procedure to secure the address of people. There's so many ways. You can get a municipality account. You can go to the homes. There's no difficulty. SAP 69s you can get at the touch of a button, because our world has, it's evolved. There's no flight risk. The trumped up charges that was happening during the course of the day in order to hold these individuals for 7 days. And I think the afternoon when I spoke to Bram, I think Bram, it was just at the point when they were told that they've got to wait 7 days. We were on a call immediately, and we were talking about the High Court application and, urgency and everything that possibly could be done. But why did we have to go to that route from having to threaten on a High Court application, and then suddenly the NPA and the ministers all started falling over the feet? The ministers and everybody else should have been on high alert on the Sunday when this was happening. And that speaks to another concern that I have as an activist, the lack of mobilization. Because we have had quite a few situations in Cape Town where we have had to get people out of custody with, in similar situations, a little bit different, but also we have got these, we are currently sitting with a problem in Ayat, actually, even in Cape Town. And it was just surprising that this happened on Sunday, because the Saturday we were at Canal Walk and we were being targeted by Zionist security inside of Canal Walk. I witnessed this. The Friday, we stand at Parliament. So we have the pro-Israels on the one side and we have the Palestinians on the other side. We had plainclothes police officers targeting the pro-Palestinians, but not targeting the pro-Israelis. So for me, from what I've witnessed over just this weekend, is that SAPS is infiltrated as well. And this is a concern. Our security is infiltrated. So we have to navigate around all of these particular factors. But this speaks once again, if I'm in Pretoria and I'm able to mobilize up to 300 individuals at the police station when someone is detained, we need to look in the other areas when we know there's an event, etc. happening. We need to increase our activism. We can't have the mentality of thinking, oh, don't worry, Fairouz is there, she'll go sort it out. Or Yasmin is there, she'll sort it out. We need to have activism of such a nature that when there is an event, we know, be prepared, anything can happen because of the elements around us, that we need to go out and support. And that is also a vital factor. I noted an increased support today, but I'd like to ask the question as well. Where was the support on Sunday? There was about, 30 people outside? Where was the support? Where was the activism? Because we come from an apartheid era where we activated. And that is how things has changed for us. Look, we're not in a perfect situation. And I hope the listeners are listening, because aspects of Islamophobia has increased in our country. It is blatant on social media, the amount of attacks that we are on, but also the attacks by those who are pro-Israel. It is become, they are not embarrassed, they're not shy about it. The attacks are in the open. But from the side of us as politicians, I hope I can speak for all of us who are pro-Palestine, we will be raising our voices in Parliament. We have started already. So within Parliament, we have to raise our voices, but we cannot do it alone. We need our communities and our activists and our lawyers and our media to come out and assist us, because we are all ultimately in a danger that if we don't wake up soon, we should have actually been awake already. We need to think about what is the legacy that we're leaving? Now, all these individuals who has been detained and impacted, they all have rights to both lay charges criminally against entities. They also have the rights to do civil charges. And these are all aspects that needs to be investigated. Shukran.
Well, shukran for that. No, I can actually concur with you, Shameema, particularly when you speak about the juvenile. And I had the opportunity of actually doing a brief interview with the youngster earlier at the court. And, one could actually see the trauma. One could actually see how visibly shaken he was. And he had this huge concern about his father, his brother as well, being separated. So, one can understand. But also on the question of mobilization, and I will bring Shabnam in because I know Shabnam and I had a discussion just talking about the specific issue surrounding mobilization. But before we get to Shabnam, Fairouz, just looking at it from your aspect, and again, when we see what Shameema has raised with regard to the legality of the police action, security concerns. Now, this is an area obviously that you focus a lot on as well. And so let's just try and unpack some of these issues with regard to the legality and the security concerns and the manner in which SAPS had actually acted on that day.
Shukran, Brother Inayat. I think one thing that our state bodies and representatives must understand is that we have moved from the time of parliamentary sovereignty where executive members of the state can just decide on violating the rights of the public, of our citizens, where they would listen to lobbies instead of the rule of the law, where there was no constitution, which basically ensured the parameters within which state actors have to abide by. This is extremely concerning. We know that it is not the only incident that has taken place, and we are monitoring every single act of victimization and intimidation by state law enforcement, by police actors against pro-Palestine activists. This is not something that has just happened now. The Loftus Stadium incident is not the only one that has been picked up. We know that this has largely come to the forefront in 2024 already, 2024. So all of those incidents are being recorded. When we have a constitutional democracy, we know that the public order policing itself is governed by our constitution. It is governed by laws. It's governed by the South African Police Act. To go beyond that renders your conduct unlawful. So many actors have actually got to answer in this instance. We've got the National Police Commissioner, General Fani Masimola. You have to answer as to why you had actually agreed to mobilize the public order policing in the manner that it had been mobilized. The provincial head in Gauteng, Lieutenant Mtombeni, they have to answer as to why the request was made. Because if we have private lobby groups having such an influence, or whether it be peers within government having such pressure as to flout our constitution and flout the very laws that govern these bodies, it's highly problematic, because then we're going to go into a space of policing crisis. We're going to have a constitutional crisis. And because our democracy is in such an infancy stage, we need more test cases in order to crystallize our rights. What we do have is a lot to work with. We know that our rights under Section 16 and under 17, it's very rare that we can find a situation like this where it is peaceful. There is no threat to public order at all. Anyone can see the videos where we have, as was pointed out, the victimization and intimidation of women and children, the affront to their dignities in asking them to strip. And we know this is not the first time that they've been asked to strip and remove Palestine regalia. So the question is, when has it become unlawful to brandish and wear and carry that flag? Because they're not only focused on the T-shirts, they also focus on taking away the flags and removing the flags. So in our rule, where we have the rule of law, in our dispensation, when has it become unlawful to do those things? So there's a lot to answer to. IPID is one body that has to be approached to investigate this. And we have to have these role players answer these very important questions. It's very concerning to see when our constitutional rights are violated. There are very strict parameters within which they can, by the police in particular, because they have the authority and power within certain circumstances and obviously within the constitutional framework to use that force. And certainly there was nothing in terms of the scenario that took place that entitled them to do that. So there's definitely something that needs to be done, and there are questions that needs to be answered. We know that in order for the public order policing to have acted the way they did, to have even approached the individuals the way that they had, there had to have been a breakdown in public order, and it is clear that that did not take place. So it's very concerning. We know that in other jurisdictions, we see that their law enforcement and policing structures, they don't operate within a constitution. We see that the lobbies, that the pro-Israeli lobbies have such a foothold into these institutions. They are flouting the rights of their citizens. For us as South Africa, with our constitution, to reach a point where we're having our activists intimidated, we're having them victimized and harassed the way they are doing is extremely concerning. So we need to have, firstly, pressure needs to be put on these institutions to say, there are parameters, please answer as to why you are exceeding those parameters. Because as the pendulum shifts in power dynamics, it cannot go back to a situation where we are a parliamentary sovereignty. So our constitutional rights need to constantly be vanguarded. Our policing structures are extremely critical. If people lose faith and trust in our police, we have seen what had happened in instances in small communities where that had taken place. During the Khayelitsha Commission, for example, we do not want to go to a space where nationally we are going to have a situation where people have lost faith in those structures that should be protecting them, like our policing structures. They're extremely important for our democracy, and we do not want to see anything erode that. What is concerning is that we see that being infiltrated by counter-constitutional elements, and we need to vanguard this, and they need to be held accountable for it.
Well, shukran for that, Fairouz. And I think, while we are talking on mobilization, and I think I must admit, even as the media, really, mobilization is a huge challenge to actually mobilize media. And I think, Bram, you and I had that discussion as well in terms of media and the media interest in this particular saga that had actually been playing out, or the lack of interest on the part of media. But I'd like to bring Shabnam into the discussion, because Shameema spoke about investigating, and I know you spoke about a commission of inquiry as well into what has actually taken place at Loftus as well. But also, more importantly, as an activist and a lawyer yourself as well, you see it from two very different angles. But at the end of the day, I think the key issue here is, once again, we need to bring this out into the open. But even in terms of mobilization, it requires the involvement of all sectors of society. We require the politicians. We need activists. We need the solidarity movement. We need the legal fraternity. We need the media. We need everybody basically to be on board to maximize on how we feel, but also to make an impact.
Well, certainly. Thank you, Inayat, and such valuable comments from all of our allies in this conversation. Without the right to free speech and the right to protest, in my opinion, none of our other rights actually exist. In February, I was in a conference in Turkey, it was hosted by the International Legal Coalition for Palestine. It focused on the ICC, the ICJ, and universal jurisdiction. And a comment I made to them, which is ringing in my head as I listen to our allies here, is that the only country that is not occupied ideologically by apartheid Israel is in fact Palestine, and of course Yemen by extension. What happened at Loftus was effectively apartheid Israel burying the South African constitution under the rubble, the same rubble the Palestinians are struggling to get out of. We know the role of sport in the days of fighting against apartheid pre-1994. But what's also very clear is that the apartheid Israel has maintained its relationships with elements within apartheid South Africa to enable it to control what happens in a so-called constitutional democracy. We've seen this play out many times over many protests, over many years in relation to Palestine, but also to other causes like Fees Must Fall, which I'll get to in a second. We've seen violence against protesters for Palestine. Tomorrow is, in fact, the next hearing in the case of Halima Hussein, may she rest in peace and in power, where Grayston Bears, I think his name is, had murdered her for her position on Palestine. He's now gone for a mental psychological evaluation, and tomorrow is to hear the outcome of that case. So we are seeing increasing levels of violence against people, but also the right to free speech and the right to protest. And it's very clear that there are conflicts of interest involved at every level, from the sporting community, but also economics. Apartheid Israel is ingrained in our water, in our electricity, in our telecommunications, in our agriculture, but also providing lethal training to South Africans, to the South African police, as well as to people in other African countries, including Ethiopia, Rwanda, Kenya, Tanzania, Malawi, Zambia, Angola, Nigeria, Cameroon, Togo, Ivory Coast, and Ghana, right? So the force that we saw exhibited against these peaceful protesters, that very technique of the knee down on the body of that person, it's not clear exactly which point of the body, but these are reminiscent of the IOF tactics that are used and that are being used by police forces in other countries, including the US, including Germany, where they are engaging in violent repression against the right to peaceful protest. And despite our position at the ICJ, I'm sorry to say that that's a very convenient stance. It is much easier to take a case to the ICJ than it is to cut off economic ties, political ties, diplomatic ties, and ensure that your police are not threatening the rights of the citizens of this country, except that this country is also occupied. The word sovereignty that Bram raised earlier is such an important one within the context of South Africa, and all countries have begun to see Palestine as the litmus test for whether their countries are in fact sovereign or not. With regards to the police force, this is an important factor to bear in mind. The private security industry is twice the number of the police and the military combined. So the threats we face are not only from the police, and I speak as someone who has been brutalized and violently arrested by police. It's not only from those elements in the police and the military, it's also the private security industrial complex that we see operating against peaceful protesters in our country and around the world. We come back to Peace Must Fall. For some of us, seeing what's happening to pro-Palestine protesters is a shock. For those of us who've been at the front lines with Peace Must Fall, or have stood in solidarity with the Marika, this is not surprising. In fact, what was experienced is a tiny percentage of what the majority of people in our country experience on a daily basis. Of the repression, right to free speech, police brutality, injustice in the courts. And yet it is unfortunate that we have to now go to court and threaten high court applications in order for some semblance of remorse to be shown, or some semblance of reason to be shown. But when Shameema asked the question, what example is being set? They are setting an example for us, for people who mobilize for Palestine or for any other country in Africa or any country in the world, that we will brutalize you when you become inconvenient and a threat to the system. And so the suppression absolutely has to be fought. I was in Uganda over the weekend, and maybe Sadiq, you can show that image. I was invited to participate in an interparliamentary conference on values, family, and sovereignty, with strong focus on disengaging Africa's dependence on foreign aid. And I'm comfortable there wearing the keffiyeh. There was no repression. Why are you wearing the keffiyeh? You shouldn't be here, etc. None of that happened. But in our own country, in which Nelson Mandela famously said South Africa is not free until Palestine is free, we have the kind of Loftus situation happening now. Except it's not going to stop us, and we can move from there. It's not going to stop us. It's only going to galvanize to get stronger as activists who believe in freedom, in liberty, and sovereignty. And the last point I want to make before we go to break is to talk about accountability, which all of us want, which all of us demand must happen. And so what we're doing as the ILCP and our partners, and we can bring the poster up on screen, is launching a Palestine Africa Liberation Project. I think Sadiq has got the poster. And essentially, it's a campaign of impactful actions, beginning with, as you can see on the white strip, a commission of inquiry, firstly, into South Africa's National Prosecuting Authority failing to prosecute IDF, I prefer IOF, war criminals committing apartheid, starvation, and genocide in Palestine, not prosecuted local recruits, not one. And secondly, the Commission will focus on the right of pro-Palestine protesters to free speech and the right to protest, which is, of course, being violated. So we're planning on hosting this Commission of Inquiry in the next 2 weeks, and we're looking for allies such as our allies in this conversation around the country and around the world to support our efforts. And perhaps after the break, we can come back to the TRC on Palestine. Thank you very much.
Much appreciated, Shabnam. Yes, we'll go for a quick air break. But just before we get there, Bram, I know you've got a flight to catch as well. And Fairouz, you've got to leave at around 8. Okay.
Yes, I do.
Bram, how much time do we have with you?
If it's okay with everyone, I'd want to leave in about 15, 20 minutes latest, which would be at about, I think, 10 to maybe 10 past, sorry. Yeah, if that's fine.
Okay, let's just go for a quick air break. We'll be back.
Operation Kurbani Maulana Timor will once again be taking a trip abroad for Kurbani. Many people in the villages live well below the poverty line and only eat meat on the days of Eid al-Adha. Support this cause at 2,100 Rand for 7 shares or 300 Rand per share. Contact Maulana Timor, Maulana Sajjad, Maulana Hamad or Maulana Abbad on 011 852 6324 or 072 299 9268 or 082 368 6866 or 072 697 0131 or 073 576 9786. All slaughtering will be supervised by a team of foreign and local ulama. Visit www.operationkurbani.org.za.
Valley's Motor Spares. We supply motor spares and accessories for all makes and models of motor cars, LDVs, bakkies, trucks, and earth-moving equipment. We deliver on time, every time. Please contact us via WhatsApp on 014-592-0925 or call 014-592-0925 or visit 28 Zenderling Street, Rustenburg. Remember the name, Valley's Motor Spares.
Kids these days are smart, and when you're competing for their attention against their smartphones, you need to make smart choices, like using Sunfoil triple refined pure sunflower oil in every meal you make. It's naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether you're cooking, frying, or baking, you get the great tasting results that'll get their attention faster than the latest app. And if that doesn't work, change the Wi-Fi password. Sunfoil. Now we're cooking.
When the perfect blend of stylish decor, exquisite halal cuisine, and warm hospitality come together, it could only mean Al Bayt Lodge. Your true home away from home. Al Bayt is the ideal heaven for families, business people, and tourists with its 4-star family rooms and other luxurious facilities. Conveniently situated close to Port Elizabeth Airport, the beach, and other amenities. Your stay will be truly unforgettable as you'll be taking home lasting memories of the warm hospitality, the serenity and tranquility that Al Bayt has to offer. For reservations, call 041 583 6415. or visit www.albaytlodge.co.za.
As temperatures drop and winter grips the country, the less fortunate in South Africa are preparing for the harsh realities that this season brings. Africa Muslims Agency is distributing blankets, clothing, and other essentials to thousands across the country. Sponsor a winter pack for 320 Rand or a blanket for 160 Rand and spread warmth this winter. Africa Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
Yasmin Badat Financial Advisory. Are your financial goals feeling out of reach? Yasmin Badat Financial Advisory is here to turn your aspirations into achievements. Our dedicated team, armed with a history of success, is ready to guide you through the complex nature of financial and investment planning. Whether you're a seasoned investor or new to the game, Our personalized solutions cater to your unique goals and risk appetite. Trust in our commitment to transparency, integrity, and excellence. Ready to unlock a world of financial freedom? Partner with us today. Call Yasmin Badat Financial Advisory at +27333462071 or visit www.yasinbadat.com. Yasmin Badat Financial Advisory, guiding you to financial success.
Make a conscious choice. Sip for change and support Palestine Drinks Africa. With every can, you help end the genocide and stand in solidarity with Palestine. Choose between our original or sugar-free options available in a case of 24. Every sip is a step towards justice. Every purchase a powerful message of unity and support for the Palestinian cause. Contact 082-888-1440 or 082-7739-556 today and be part of the change. Palestine Drinks Africa. Sip for change. Liberty for everyone.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media.
Well, we continue with tonight's edition of In Conversation with myself, Inayat Wadi, on this Wednesday evening, as we continue with my panel of guests this evening in the aftermath and also unpacking the case of the Loftus 5 and looking at some of the consequences and legal ramifications. Fairouz Nagia, Bram Hanekom, Shabnam, Palesa, Mohamed, Advocate Shameema Dollie, and Attorney Yasmin Omar. Fairouz, I know you're going to leave in the next few minutes. So, just, looking at it, from your perspective and after having heard, the esteemed panel as well, and just moving forward from here, because I'm sure there are some great lessons that we can actually take from the events at Loftus and also right up to today with the bail hearing. And you've been following these developments very, very closely. What are some of the key issues that actually stand out for you, particularly in terms of lessons learned, but also going forward, looking at some of the consequences that may possibly arise? I think, Fairouz, is your mic muted?
Apologies, yes. Shukran for that.
Okay.
So I think it's very important for society to understand that our constitutional rights is enforceable horizontally between private institutions, between private individuals. So when we go and we approach SAFA, for example, people have a right to demonstrate and express their statements that they want to free Palestine. Whatever the messaging is around, getting Israel, kicking them off from all sporting events, that is something they have a right to do. If the police transgress those bounds, it is nothing but thuggery. It is arbitrary, it is unlawful. And I think our training institutions, when they train our police, when they train our public order policing especially, they need to understand what their constitutional parameters are. For those individuals, it's nothing but trying to gag people from doing what they need to do in terms of standing up for Palestine. And people are recognizing this, they're recognizing the trends. I think it's important that protesters know their rights and understand what their rights are. They have no right to say, take off your clothing. They have no right to confiscate a flag that is not an unlawful or dangerous object. The police need to understand that. And so do our people as well. And we need to find ways on how to express that and assert our rights in a manner that will still allow us to be kept safe. And if our institutions are threatening that safety, our democratic state institutions are threatening that safety, it is highly problematic, and something will have to be done eventually to ensure that that accountability is brought to the fore and that they actually do abide.
Well, shukran for that, Fairouz, and also for taking time out for us this evening right here on Salam Media, and we wish you all the best. I know you've got to leave, but please take care, and hopefully we will be touching base at some point in time. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Yes, Bram, let's get to you. Now, Bram, I was just sitting and thinking as the panel was talking, and I wish that this discussion could be held on a mainstream platform, because looking at South Africa, looking at SAFA, it's standing as far as the majority of South Africans are concerned. And now that with the Loftus incident, to an extent, obviously they have been exposed as well. And it's sad that majority of the population in South Africa, majority of the people in South Africa may not be aware of what is playing out. And this is the reason why I'm saying this is a discussion ideally that should take place on a mainstream media platform. But as independent media, yes, we will continue in line with our ethos and our humanitarian journalism principles here at Salam Media. But just looking at how far is Africa for Palestine prepared to go with this? Because being in court today, one question that was being asked is, who is actually behind this? Who prompted that security guard to come over to the protesters to demand the flag, to demand they take off those shirts? And these are some of the answers, because this raises further questions, but these are some of the answers that people are actually looking for.
Oh, thank you. I think we have a lot of confidence in the advice we've received from a number of lawyers, and particularly, of course, Yasmin, who represented the families and the people who were detained. And of course, others like Shameema and others who've given advice, and their members of parliament won't go to court for us because they're members of parliament, even if they're activists. But we're fortunate to have that support. I think one of the possibilities, and it's a bit early to say, one of the possibilities that we've been discussing, I hope I'm not out of line, Yasmin, but one of the possibilities we're looking at is taking on SAFA, because it's very clear that SAFA have violated the constitution. Simple things like people paid for tickets, they must get their money back for those tickets. If you don't allow people to watch a match and you take their money, 700 tickets were purchased, and 700, which, that's 49,000 Rand in tickets that they betrayed the understanding of a person who purchased the ticket. Then, of course, the recklessness and the defamation and the impact on people's image of sending in police on peaceful soccer fans who want to show their solidarity with Palestine. So we're definitely looking at hopefully taking on SAFA, because we really do feel like SAFA it needs to come and explain that. And certainly if SAFA didn't put a ban on Palestinian solidarity at soccer matches, then the police had no place whatsoever to be in there in the first place, trying to remove T-shirts and banners. So it'll also be interesting for the case we're having with the police, because if they can't explain why they were doing it and who called them and on what basis they felt the need to interfere with peaceful protesters, I think it'll affect their case, because it is very odd. And I think what I'm meaning, why I'm referring to the case, is the case, this whole process that they have forced upon the Loftus Five is going to hopefully expose those whom are responsible. And because I suspect in the legal process, they'll be obliged to explain why exactly they came in the first place, why exactly they felt the need to tell people to remove and confiscate shirts, because that's another thing that needs to be confronted. People paid for T-shirts, and the T-shirts were stolen from them. And when a policeman comes and says, take off a T-shirt or give me your T-shirt, I don't think that that's normal and acceptable. Not so long ago, we had an incident where an activist went into Virgin Active and was wearing a BDS shirt at the time. And quite a lot of controversy surrounded an incident where they tried to force him not to be in Virgin Active. And ultimately, this came, it seems they apologized and they allowed him to return to that Virgin Active with his BDS shirt, which was very clearly in support of Palestine. There's a private company that tried to suppress the solidarity of Palestine and tried to suppress the dignity and the human rights of a person expressing views that he felt very passionate about. The soccer stadium is very big. to try for 70,000 people to conform to your political views when they suit you, because we do feel quite strongly that had it been a Ukrainian solidarity event, Safa or whoever it was, that we'll find out who it was and so on, probably wouldn't have had the same concern. And I think it just speaks to the dignities, the freedoms that were hard fought for in this country, and that we can't live in a society where a soccer match where South Africa is playing another country doesn't allow South Africans, if they come with Palestinian T-shirts on. And an environment where a piece of land that's called a stadium is a space where police can strip you of your dignity, can demand you take off a shirt, can steal your shirts and flags and banners, and can abuse you in the process. And should you resist or show any kind of objection to wanting to hand over your stuff and to give away the seat that you'd paid to sit in for that period of time because you're a customer of this Safa or whoever gets the money from the soccer match, how absurd is that? That you can pay for a ticket, you can peacefully sit in your seat, and you can be forced out that seat. You can be told to take off a shirt. You could be told that they can steal your flags that you paid for as well. And then should you not roll over and just run when they want you to, you're now considered someone who's entitled to be sprayed with tear gas with your children. I mean, 10-year-olds were sprayed with tear gas. I mean, the experience people had in Loftus, here in Pretoria, in the lavish field, which has hosted the World Cup rugby and a whole bunch of prestigious events, turned into an environment that reminded us strongly of our history. And I think that it's really important that this be dealt with decisively. Certainly, SAFA need to tell us, is it illegal for people to wear Red Card Israel shirts to their soccer matches? And we can fight them in court around that, I believe. I'm sure we'll get support from our attorneys. By the way, they did help pro bono. I shouldn't say this, but really kind of them. So we believe activists and legal activists and advocates will hopefully help in this process. And because we can't leave it unchallenged. And if they say it's not allowed, then we challenge them. If they say it is allowed, then who exactly is in charge of soccer in South Africa? And who then decides that you can't have that shirt in that? And ultimately, the controversy that surrounded that activist that was thrown out of Virgin Active for wearing the shirt led to circumstances where a private company, probably with vested interest or people who had shareholding who had vested interest in the issue, succumbed to that pressure and apologized publicly and allowed that person to return to. Now we're talking about a couple of hundred, about 400 or so people, including young children, who were dealt with as they were dealt with. And I think that we're dealing with something really big here, actually, a very fundamental. And I think it was mentioned earlier that these are fundamental rights. We don't give them away. And when it comes time to fight for them, we need to fight for them because we can't just based on and the irony behind it, by the way, is some of the activists in the stadium were pop crew members. They were policemen and they were people who worked at correctional services. They were union members of a union that unionizes that sector. And so, to try reduce sober, focused, genuine, committed activists and soccer fans from sitting, to try reduce them into some kind of riotous, violent group is absolutely absurd and can't be unchallenged. We have to fight this really, really hard and get justice. One last point on that. Today, I think it was quite incredible. We did, I think, Shameema, you'd have been happy today. I think the court was full to the brim. The rumor has it that the magistrate even went to put makeup and changed because it was such a platform. And she came in and there were cameras. And I think magistrate courts, they get these moments, and it seemed to matter to the magistrate. She'd come in looking very beautiful. And so, I mean, today was an important day to show solidarity. But what was really, to me, a really interesting moment is the advocate says, are they employed? What do they do? One of them comes up, very senior member of Jama-ah who works in the deputy minister's office, works for the deputy minister. The next one is a deputy sheriff. The next one is an accountant. And these are not people of not sound mind. These are not people who went to cause trouble. These people went with their children. Some went with some other people went with grandchildren, and they went to go watch soccer and to show their solidarity and be part of a global trend, like you mentioned earlier, which has been allowed across the world to show that, look, we don't want normal sport in an abnormal society. We don't accept Israel being a member of FIFA, violating FIFA's own rules, by the way. And then our South African soccer, our South African Football Association, that's meant to
I think for some reason or the other, we've lost you, Bram. I see it's gone a bit dark as well. Possibly there could be a power failure in your area, but we thank you, Bram, for taking time out. I know you've got a flight to catch as well. Safe travels as well. And once again, an absolute pleasure having you with us right here on Salam Media.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. And thank you again, Yasmin and everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, Bram Hanekom obviously needs to leave us, but Yasmin, let's just continue now. I know at this point in time, we know that there is going to be further investigation from what we heard in court on the part of the prosecution, and obviously we've got the return date of the 18th of June, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a day I won't forget. It's going to be my birthday on that day, so hopefully I should be in court on that day. Should we get there? But just, looking at, you've had the opportunity of looking at the footage, interrogating the footage as well. And the whole question surrounding Schedule 5 offense as well. Now, we know those charges were actually read out, and I'm not too sure, just in your assessment in interrogating what you've seen until now, what are your thoughts, and how does this measure up to the Schedule 5 that the prosecution talks of?
So you'll remember that that offences are separated into these schedules so that the courts treat them differently. So probably the worst schedule is Schedule 6, where we're looking at very serious offences like rape of a minor or premeditated murder, armed robbery, those kind of things. And then we've got Schedule 5, which is just as serious, just a little less harsh than Schedule 6, which calls for places an onus on the accused, like Schedule 6 offences does, where the accused must satisfy the court that the interest of justice requires their release on bail. Now, the Schedule 5 and Schedule 6 offences are generally considered more onerous on accused because it places a burden on the accused to satisfy the court that it will be in the interest of justice that they be released. In contrast, the other schedules say the state must show good reason why these accused must stay in custody. That is why it was so important for how we categorized this offense. So when the matter was seized on Monday, the prosecutor told the court on Monday it's a Schedule 5 offense, immediately raising the concerns of the magistrate that this could not be a quick and easy bail application, because if the prosecuting authority was saying it's a Schedule 5 offense, it means there would have to be a formal bail application where the accused would have to satisfy the court that it was in the interest of justice for them to be released back to their families. So when we went to court today, and after all of this negotiations and discussions, we were quite surprised to see now the state had changed its tune. It was listening to what we said at the outset when we said, but these are it's not Schedule 5 or Schedule 6. These are simple schedule offences where even the police could have granted bail. Now you see an immediate shift in how the prosecuting authority is viewing the very offences that caused it to ensure that the accused stay in custody. So what we see here is that it's evident that even the prosecuting authority is not certain of what its case or the strength of its case is against the accused. Because we can't have on Monday the prosecuting authority saying it's Schedule 5, and we come to court on Wednesday and they say, okay, we concede, now we're good, we're with you, it's Schedule 1. So it just shows from all of that has happened that there is something in the background that doesn't render this matter have been dealt with in a wholesome fashion. Something is very wrong, and there's outside influence, and this influence is confirmed by what happened. On Monday, we have a situation where the magistrate is steadfast. I've got no time to run this bail application. This court is just way too busy. The prosecutor says, well, we need time. We need 7 days to go and check upon addresses of the accused. And then we come on Wednesday after having spoken to the Deputy Minister of Justice, having spoken to the representatives of the National Prosecuting Authority, and it appears then that the executive was now able to influence the court and the prosecuting authority to then change their stance. So what is disturbing then is the fact that our judiciary is not as independent as it should be. And it's clear that there were interferences with the procedure that the accused was subjected to. That is why what we assumed would be a simple bail proceeding that could have been granted by the police turned into something this major. Now, I think from our discussions here today, it's evident that there's a movement happening, and something that is not something good happening. There's something disturbing happening in our democracy, and we say it's a new democracy, but really we're quite fine to this democracy. By now, we should know the rules of the game, and we see what is happening is a slow chipping away of what the Constitution should stand for. We should not be in a situation where we're sitting in courts now where minors are dealt with the way my accused number 5 was dealt with. Kept in custody, sent to Soshanguve correctional facility. This child should not have been there. Why is it that the court didn't know what to do? Why did all of this happen? And I say this because I think that there is slowly and insidiously a chipping away of our democracy. Because if you listen to all that we've gathered from our meeting today, you'll see police brutality on the rise. Every time there is an incident happening, suddenly there are riot police in heavy gear. They've got shields, they've got batons, they've got heavy boots, they've got pepper spray, tear gas. I mean, children at university are treated in this fashion. When, as we've discussed now in the panel of the Fees May Fall campaign, you'll also remember that when COVID lockdown was on, the communities became militarized. There was military inside the communities and led to the death of Colin Chauke, that case that became so well known during the COVID pandemic. Then we had most recently the case that we were involved in where the Stilfontein miners, the police decided we're going to close Valamgodi, we're going to close the hole, let the people starve and die in there. And that is in the name of policing. And we see slowly the chipping away of basic human rights to humanity, to dignity, to life being compromised. And in this most recent incident, what was the need for policing to be done in a fashion where you pile onto people, you grab an individual, you throw him to the ground, you kneel on him, you punch him, you beat him. What was the need for all of that? What was the need to tell women to remove their tops and allow them to walk in their underwear? All dignity is lost. So we see slowly, definitely, a chipping away of the democracy, and discussions like this are so necessary for us to remind ourselves to constantly safeguard, constantly challenge each violation, each breach, because the more we let it go, the more we look away, we see it spreading more and more. Well, it started off where we were complaining at Marikana, police using brutality to bring the people, to protesting miners, under control, and we lost lives there. And then what we emerged in our discussion today, when Bram says, what about the Virgin Active incident? Then we mentioned, what about the university incident? You see the other companies doing it, mining companies allowed to do it. It's just now becoming insidious, where people, it's spreading to companies, to private organs, not just organs of state. So it is so important for us to see it in that perspective. And that is why even this litigation, say we are successful in telling the prosecuting authority, this is two-faced kind of litigation against a criminal litigation against our accused. You went to the International Court of Justice. You said one thing, and there in our country, you are oppressing our people who are enjoying the freedom of expression and aligning themselves with the plight of the Palestinians. Say we raise that argument and we are successful. Should we then just simply heel over and say, well, that was a good job, we've done it? Because what it appears to happen is, calling for commissions of inquiry and all of that, government just placates us. They tell us what they think is needed for us to keep quiet about it afterwards. So it would appear that, say we make these representations and we are successful, then it's going to be like, good job, okay, stop here now, you've placated, you won. But it shouldn't stop there. Government should be called in order. We must make a fuss about these things, because what is happening is each time when Marikana happened, they said, okay, to make everybody happy, we'll have a commission of inquiry, which the taxpayers had to spend a small fortune on. Nothing much came of that commission of inquiry. Then you have another instant, and they say, okay, Stilfontein, let's have another commission of inquiry. And then we can have commissions on commissions, and government is just not held accountable. And they make no measures to say, from going forward, this is how we're going to change. This is what we're going to do different. It shouldn't be that each time we call them to order, that they do things just to placate us. And that's exactly what happened with this matter. We told them, we're going to court on Tuesday afternoon. We're going to ask the High Court to make certain orders and tell you how to do your work. And then after that, they say, okay, no, let us work together now. Why couldn't we have worked together on Sunday and not put these people in custody? As everybody's correctly pointed out, why wasn't it done? It is because government, when they are pushed in a corner and they are caught doing what is wrong, they do quickly put in measures to simply placate us, and possibly calling it damage control. But we, as people who are privy to what is really going on in the country, should spread the word that this is not acceptable. We can't allow this to happen. It's not just, it started off attack on men. When it was Marikana, you attacked men, you shot men down, you shot fathers, you shot brothers, you shot husbands. And then it went on in Stilfontein, where it spread a little more, and we discovered inside those mine holes were children. And now we have a situation in Loftus, and the Loftus 5 will be the Loftus incident will be known for the fact that they stripped women of their clothing and allowed them to walk in their underwear out of that stadium, and they were forced out of the stadium like animals. We should not let it get progressively worse. And I think even if this matter is successfully completed, it should not be left there. It should be one of those examples of how we test whether our democracy is still as intact as we wanted it to be, or we can see measures where it is slowly being derogated from, where it's slowly being rendered less than what we intended for it to be when we started in 1994. Thanks, Inayat.
Yes, Yasmin. In fact, I think I can see why you feel very, very strongly. And obviously, apart from just representing the accused, the concern in terms of our democracy coming from the Society for the Protection of our Constitution. And I can see why you feel so strongly. And perhaps, Shameema, if you'd like to comment, because obviously it is disturbing what Yasmin is saying, and particularly looking at where we are as a democracy and how some of the democratic values that we speak of, that we boast about, we say we've got the best constitution in the world, but these are being eroded through actions like what we've seen that had taken place at Loftus.
Shukran, Inayat. I cannot agree with Yasmin. She has taken everything that we feel, and she's placed it before everyone, because this is the reality we sit with. Our constitution is currently a document which is being on the ground and being trodden on. There is no regard, no respect for the constitution whatsoever. But this breaking away of our democracy has been happening for a while now. And we have just closed our eyes to actually what is happening. And now we are sitting with a situation that we are sorely being tested. And we've witnessed it, not just in this matter. We've had several matters. I think was it last year when we had the matter at Sea Point, where 3 individuals was arrested, where Caspers came in, riot police came in. You had the pro-Israel entities there with firearms, ex-IDF amongst us with firearms, and nothing was done despite charges laid against these individuals. We had one young woman who was stabbed by a law enforcement officer. Nothing happened despite charges being laid. We've had situations in Cape Town where a councillor's brother threatened a woman with rape upon her and her family. This matter was taken to Somerset courts. The NPA did nothing about the matter. The matter disappeared. On questioning the head of prosecution, Shameema, with regard to it, no responses. nothing happened. And today, those individuals continue to threaten those pro-Palestinian activists. So it is very important that when these matters occur, even like Yasmin indicated, let's say we do representations, etc., and it is successful, we cannot leave this matter. I want the 5 Loftus individuals to rest up tonight. But by tomorrow, we need to start working on laying those criminal charges. We need to start working on laying those civil charges. So it is very, very important, because whatever happens from here sets precedent, and it also will indicate which way we are going to go in order to set a basis for others to follow and to ensure that our democracy stays alive and stays intact, and that the individuals who are assuming that they can destroy our democracy and destroy the rights of individuals will be cautioned, because there will be repercussions to their actions. Right now, we have a justice system that is currently failing us. It's failing us miserably. And we've allowed, to a large extent, we've actually allowed this to happen. I think the other concern that we do have is that we have a constitution, we have a legal system, etc. But how accessible is it to the masses? It has become very inaccessible when it comes to cost, etc. And that is where I'm very grateful to those individuals who even pro bono comes out to assist. And I'd like to make a call on more pro bono attorneys, advocates, and other stakeholders to come on board, because this that we are currently facing is bigger than all of us, and yet it also impacts on everyone, and it has a rippling effect. I just wanted to bring up something. There was, one of the things that was also of concern to me is that both yesterday and today we had discussions surrounding correctional services and how full our prisons, etc., is. And it became quite shocking as I'm listening to everything as well, that these individuals that is detained, they find space to detain people unnecessary, and yet we talk about the poor infrastructure that we have in correctional services, in the prisons, etc. Yet we still overburdening these institutions with individuals who should have been out on warning. Just another example of how our systems are failing us. And yeah, it's, we have to ensure accountability in these matters, transparency, and we have to get to the root of the corruption that has been exposed from SAFA to actually Loftus as well, because I'm sure that there are more stakeholders involved in what has happened over this weekend at Loftus, but also we are sorely being tested, even in Cape Town. For example, your picketers, etc. There is not a week that doesn't go by that complaints is lodged. And we've also noticed more and more Zionist entities that are at the waterfront, at Canal, wherever there are pickets, in order to aggravate and agitate the picketers and anybody who is pro-Palestine. And we saw this on a large scale on Sunday.
Yes, Shameema, I think, just listening to you, possibly we're onto something very, very big here, and this could possibly open up a can of worms. And, Shabnam, perhaps, you just like, I know you wanted to talk about the TRC as well, but that, again, that obviously to a large extent, will open up this can of worms, from what you and I obviously have had a few private discussions.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of points I want to make, and then we'll close with that poster, is to say that what does the 16 days of activism mean in this country when women are stripped of their clothing? And this is why those activists in the anti-GBV, anti-child abuse space always say that 16 days should be 365, because clearly the police have no conception of what 16 days actually means. In fact, it's an insult to the women of our country who fought against apartheid and are fighting for liberation even post-apartheid. Secondly, that I hope that those who are affected, the Loftus 5, are also going to file civil cases, not only against the Minister of Police or the Minister of Sports or whoever it might be, but also in the personal capacity of these police officers, because that's how we can actually set precedent. And that's why I want to commend people at the event who were smart enough to get evidence, photographic evidence, video evidence, getting it from different angles, incredibly important. However, it brings us to this point of we've got to hit them where it hurts, and that is the economics. We should be boycotting. We should be boycotting any event hosted from SAFA until they come to the table and change their policies to reflect the conscience and the will of South Africans and indeed people of the world. Of course, there's the option of IPID, which is a notoriously ineffective body, but perhaps the Loftus 5 will also be looking into filing a complaint at IPID. And let me close with these 2 points. So one is to say that, you know, if you zoom out from South Africa and you look at the African continent and you see us surrounded by AFRICOM, infiltrated by apartheid Israel. In South Africa, you have the initiative, the agenda to separate the Western Cape and Cape Town from the rest of the country to make it a Zionist homeland plan B. That is in full swing. Then you look at Somaliland. Apartheid Israel is building military bases in Somaliland. Why? Well, partially because they want Gazans to be displaced, ethnically cleansed into Somaliland, and they can control and make their lives miserable in that part of the African continent. You look at the DRC. Who is involved in the Blood Diamonds conflict and the genocide in the DRC? It is Israeli billionaires, and so on and so forth. So there is a critical need for Afro-Palestinian solidarity, which brings me to that poster, Sadiq, if you can bring it back up. We've talked about the civil society-led commission of inquiry into, one, the lack of prosecutions by the NPA against IDF, IOF recruits, but secondly, the violations of free speech and protest. Sadiq, if you can bring that poster back up, please. But at the bottom of the poster, you will see 3 further activities. On the left, you will see a TRC. It's not reconciliation. It is a Truth and Restoration Commission on Palestine, being led and driven and supported by Africans in South Africa and across the continent. Secondly, we're planning an Africa-Palestine summit to identify what unites us, who and what are our challenges. I mean, apartheid Israel is an obvious one. And thirdly, how do we achieve truth, justice, human rights, liberation, and peace for Africa and Palestine? And lastly, on that poster, which of course will circulate, is an arts and culture festival. Arts and culture, of course, being central to healing and to liberation. So we invite our allies participating in this conversation, as well as those listening to it in South Africa and around the world, to support our efforts, because ultimately the power of the people is greater than people in power. Palestine is a litmus test. DRC is a litmus test, and we will not fail humanity. We will continue to rise until all of humanity is free from the parasite 1% and their predators operating, whether it's in South Africa or any part of the world. Justice will prevail.
We thank you for that, Shabnam. And let's just go around very, very quickly, perhaps a minute or two, starting with you, Yasmin, as well. Just some closing comments and, just from here, where to from here?
Well, I think just going on from where Shabnam left, there's a saying that the oppressed become the worst oppressors. And we've seen that with Palestine. We've seen that with how the Israelis treat people after their own experience. And we've got a similar situation here in South Africa. Here are the people who are oppressed, and now they're in control. And then how soon we forget what basic human rights are about. So I think going forward, as I've appealed earlier, is that let's not stop. Let's not stop calling out our own government when things are done wrong. We're calling out what's going on in Palestine and in other parts of the world where injustices are being done. But we must call out non-compliances with the Constitution and where we see transgressions being made. We must call it out and ask for government to indicate what are you going to do to rectify the situation. And it's exactly what we plan for the Loftus 5 case. In that, when I had a brief discussion, and when we had a discussion with the people at court, the families are adamant we're not going to leave this thing alone. We want to hold government accountable, and they have to tell us what measures you're going to take. And as we discuss now, it doesn't just go to government. It has to be private organs like SAFA, like the person controlling the stadium. All other private organs must be called to order and called to give undertakings so that we can put them to terms and we can put them on record as committing themselves to a set of principles. Because if we don't do that and let them run scot-free, this kind of slow invasion into our constitutional rights will continue. So inshallah, we make an impact in this way.
Well, shukran for that, Yasmin. Shameema?
Okay, so from my side, firstly, I would like people to understand the importance of mobilization. That's very important because I found that that was one of the things that was slow and it was lacking. So even if there is divisions in whatever entity you belong, you take your divisions away and your differences, etc., and you mobilize and you come together for a common cause, because this is bigger than any of us. That's very important. A risk assessment of every event that you attend, from a protest to a picket. Know what the risk is. Always have advocates, etc., attorneys on standby, because that is what we have. We've got these little mobilization groups. That's very important. Know what you can and can't do. Know the terms and conditions of the place that you are entering. Because when I looked at the terms and conditions upon which the tickets was initially based, it was archaic and it wasn't relevant and it didn't stand for what was actually happening. So that is also important. So we also have to, from our side, be smart in everything that we are doing. We know what's happening globally. We need to know our rights and we need to obviously exercise those rights. And those individuals going into, it was a peaceful event. I mean, to watch a match. So you need to know the rules and the regulations and when someone is overstepping and what you need to do in those type of situations. Rightfully so, we always tell people, take videos and take images. But a very important aspect that I also need to let everybody on, SAPS does not have a right to remove videos and images from your phone. And this was done to one of the individuals. So please be alert. That's obstruction of justice. A charge can be laid. They have no right to remove evidence, and you are allowed to take videos of SAPS or any other individual in these type of situations. So that is all the very important aspects to note. Also, very important, never be alone when you are protesting or picketing. Always make sure when the crowd disperse, etc., that you always are with others, because we've had situations where people was the last person to leave maybe a protest and got arrested. So this is, it's shocking that we're actually speaking about this, because the old days of apartheid and what we went through is just flashing in my mind. And when I saw the images of Loftus and those shields and the police brutality, I mean, I saw some individuals walking away and SAPS coming behind these individuals and just blatantly knocking them. That was brutal. It was unacceptable. And it brought back, it was, I hate calling people out on colors and stuff, but it was just a different color. But it was the same thing of our past and where we came from. And for individuals not to know the history, it is also very, very concerning. Another important aspect, please educate from young right up what apartheid is, what we went through, what we don't want that oppression to come back, what the democracy is, to appreciate what we have and to protect it and to guard it. So that is from me for tonight. Shukran.
Shukran, Afwan, for that. Shabnam, I'll let you have the last word.
A threat, injustice anyway is a threat to justice everywhere. That's a philosophy and ideology that we live by. What is happening to the Palestinians, we've said for decades now, they will eventually do to us. But they have been doing it. Just been living in this bubble of we have a constitution and progressive and we have these rights and all of that. But this experience, there are positives that come out of it. In that young people will become more mobilized, in that we become smarter about using the right to boycott, and in that we show more solidarity to the majority of South Africans who experience oppression, police brutality, state brutality, and tyranny from the state and from the corporations that benefit from the violations of our rights. We're going to build a stronger solidarity. This is not the end, it is merely the beginning. And much respect to that young man who had that experience, but it's going to shape him as an activist for the freedom of Palestinians, Africans, and people around the world. Amandla.
Well, Jazakallah to all of you as well, to Yasmin Omar, to Shameema Dollie, and also to you, Shabnam, and also early on to Fairouz and Bram Hanekom. I think, obviously a lot of value, and I'm actually quite glad we've had this discussion so soon and on such an eventful day as we have had, Yasmin. And I think, while it's so fresh, I think there's just so much that has actually come out of this discussion, but more importantly, a lot of food for thought. And I think, what you mentioned as well, Shameema, some of the guidelines, some of the advices that you've actually given, and it's just something that we need to think about. And I think more importantly, it's unity in purpose. And I think this sometimes we find lacking, because of differences within organizations. And when it comes to something like this, we are all we're all there for the Palestinian cause. Our approach may be different, but when push comes to shove, and when we need to obviously put our shoulder to the wheel, we need to do it together. And this is the only way we can actually move forward. So to all of you, once again, Jazakallah for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Shukran, Brother Inayat.
Yes, well, that brings us to the end of tonight's edition of In Conversation with myself, Inayat Wadi. And in fact, I didn't anticipate it to go for that long, but there was just so much that we needed to unpack in the case of the Loftus 5. And we've just heard so much more pure, from a legal perspective, but also looking at some of the consequences and more importantly, the lessons that we can actually take from this experience as a society. And again, the call has been made: mobilize, mobilize, mobilize. And when we mobilize, let us be united about it. And with that thought, I'm leaving you from myself and the team here at Salam Media. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.